sure that we can do everything that we do. As we've reflected on 2020 and 2021, people have verbalized how Black women hold up the world. Well, we hold up the world, but sometimes to the detriment of ourselves. And sometimes we don't realize the importance of taking a step back in reflection, but taking a step back for healing. And the American Heart Association has really looked at health disparities specifically for women and for African American women in particular. And so I wanted to just share a few things, a few thoughts around heart disease that you can internalize for yourself, but also share with your loved ones. So I'll go to the next slide. Hold on one second, sorry about that. I apologize, give me 1 second, please, to just open this up in a better presentation mode. Well, that doesn't look much better, but we're gonna try anyway. All right, sisters, thank you for your patience. Nonetheless, it's my pleasure to be with you today as we talk about American Heart Association's Go Red for Women's Health Month. I'm the medical director, lead physician for the Long Beach community. I oversee currently 4 different practices. And when we talk about, again, self-preservation, I'm one of those people that had some phenomenal opportunities in my career, but realized perhaps a little bit too late that I was doing a little too much travel, too much stress. And when you have a lot of travel, a lot of stress, it leads to a lot of other things and things that aren't necessarily the best for us. So when I thought about what would be really the best for me, I decided to take a break from all of that kind of exposure and focus more on personal development and family life. For me, my family is my husband and myself, but I have a vertical family. My parents are a big part of my responsibility. And so I realized that I needed to really focus a little bit more on myself. And so I took an opportunity here locally in my community where I would not have to get on planes nor trains and have a very short commute. So I'm very blessed about that. So in order for us to focus on cardiovascular health today, we really need to have a great unilateral understanding of what the disease is. What is cardiovascular disease? So really cardiovascular, we're just going to break down the word cardiovascular. Cardiovascular is a root in two different words. Cardio for cardiac, the heart itself, and then vascular, which is the vascular system, the system of blood vessels that affects our entire circulatory system. In essence, we think about cardiovascular health as being a number of different diagnoses. That would include coronary heart disease, which ultimately, when there is a lack in blood flow, could result in a heart attack. Cerebro meaning brain vascular disease, results in some things that people know as a CVA, a stroke, or perhaps even a TIA. High blood pressure is also part of the concept of cardiovascular disease and is very prevalent. We'll talk about prevalence as well as other definitions in the subsequent slides. And then congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure being a very, very common and great source of death and morbidity in the Black community. Congenital cardiovascular defects, not as common, so we won't focus on that today. And then lastly, peripheral vascular disease, incredibly common and easily treated, but unfortunately lots do not have the skills to understand exactly what that is and how it's best treated. Now, I will be happy to take questions at the close of this dialogue or at any time really. So please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. And certainly if I could ask anyone from the leadership of the current NASC to let me know if there's anything in the chat, I'd be happy to discuss those topics as well. So cardiovascular disease claims about 500,000 women's lives every year. This is much more prevalent than breast cancer or any other cancer. So remember, this is the #1 killer of adults. And specifically, it kills more women than the next 7 causes of death combined. That would include breast cancer, which kills 1 in 30 women, And then again, cardiovascular disease kills 1 of every 2.5 women. So about 50%, almost 50% of all women will die from cardiovascular disease. Yet a lot of women are not necessarily familiar with that, nor familiar with the risk factors. So when we talk about women specifically in heart disease, again, we want to focus on the fact that heart disease is the #1 cause of death for women. Stroke is the #3 cause of death in women. So again, just those 2 diagnoses alone, very, very common. But here's the one that really, really resonates with most of us, because when you look at the statistics, it will make a lot more sense. High blood pressure, which often is completely asymptomatic, meaning most persons have no symptoms, no knowledge of their blood pressure. Women aged 20 and older, that's all of us on this call. White women have approximately 30% of all white women over the age of 20 have high blood pressure. 45% of African American women above the age of 20 have high blood pressure. Again, we're talking about over 20, not over 40, not over 60. When you get to over 40, the age 40 years of age, we're talking 60% of African American women have hypertension. That number is very similar in the Mexican American community, but at younger ages, African American women, you see the disparities, have much higher rates of hypertension than other populations. And we can talk a little bit about why those things may be. There's lots of different theories, we'll say, about that. But again, it's important that we understand what the disease is, that is hypertension, and what we can do to try to prevent it or at least manage it. So first, you need to know exactly how we define hypertension in the medical community. Hypertension, also known as high blood pressure, is based on 2 different values: the systolic blood pressure, which is the top number, and then the diastolic blood pressure, which is the bottom number. So if you ask most organizations, the American Heart Association, the American Society of Cardiologists, the internal medicine and family medicine organizations, they may have a slight difference in what they think the goal is to achieve for blood pressure. However, universally, we know that if your blood pressure is greater than 140 over 90, 140 over 90, then you do indeed have high blood pressure. Now, we say that that should be taken in 2 different settings, in 2 different occasions. The reason why we say that now is because it's very clear lots of individuals have what's called white coat hypertension. They go to the doctor's office, their blood pressure may be more elevated due to anxiety or stress just in that moment. But if they were to check their blood pressure at home, their blood pressure might be quite normal. So the literature, go ahead, please.
Would you mind using presentation mode if you press present at the top?
Please, please let me try to do that. Unfortunately,
you're going to see a button that, well, not a button, a word that says present on the right corner next to the button that's yellow that says share. Farther down from your mouse.
You know what, I think. I'm so sorry, tell me where?
You're going to go to your right-hand side and there'll be a button that says present. Yes, right there.
Okay, unfortunately, this was covered by my my images, my video. So I couldn't see it because I was covering it. So thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, all right, thank you. So nonetheless, we were talking about knowing our numbers. So the high blood pressure values, again, 140 over 90, are those critical numbers that you need to know. But when it comes to white coat hypertension, again, a lot of people go to the doctor's office maybe once a year or for some type of acute issue. Their blood pressure is elevated, but it's not consistent with their normal everyday blood pressure. So the research is really pointing towards the use of ambulatory blood pressure monitoring. What does that mean? That you get a monitor for your blood pressure and you check your blood pressure at home. And you keep a record of that, and then you provide that to your clinician, your physician, your nurse practitioner, your PA. The reality is that those ambulatory or home-based blood pressure values are much more accurate than those that would be done at that doctor's office at that single visit. And as we're doing more telemedicine, and certainly many of you probably have had a telemedicine visit with your doctor over the last year, you probably have been asked, okay, do you have any information regarding your vital signs? And the blood pressure is usually the second vital sign after your weight. And we'll talk about the weight in just a second. So nonetheless, the reality is it's important for you to know your numbers. And one of the biggest areas around your numbers is really the blood pressure. So we'll say 140/90 is the consensus now for high blood pressure, greater than 140/90. Here's another number that's really important for you to know, which is cholesterol. Now, this is one area where we're winning. Praise God. There's one area where we're winning, and that's cholesterol. African Americans tend not to have very high cholesterol. Specifically, many African Americans have high HDL. HDL is the high density lipoprotein. That's the good cholesterol. Black folks tend to have a lot of good cholesterol, which is good. It is cardiac protective, though our total cholesterol may be a little bit higher in some instances, greater than 200. Our good cholesterol, or the HDL for Black folks, tends to be a little bit better than for our white, Asian, or Latino counterparts. So though we do know that cholesterol is a problem and a very significant risk factor, this is one area, unlike hypertension, for which we have incredibly high rates. Cholesterol is one of those areas that's very valuable, but thankfully, most African Americans don't have a significantly high, based on percentage, problem with their cholesterol, though it's a significant risk factor. So again, just to describe cholesterol in more detail, a normal cholesterol value is less than 200. A borderline value is between 200 and 240, and 240 is considered to be high cholesterol. It's more than twice the desirable level, and if you have diabetes or another metabolic condition, this is extremely critical. And so if you have diabetes, we're often looking at not just your total cholesterol, but your LDL cholesterol. That's the low density lipoprotein. That's the bad cholesterol. So in instances where you have diabetes or another metabolic syndrome or risk factor for heart disease, we usually say your LDL needs to be less than 100. Why is that? If it's greater than 100, this is your LDL cholesterol, you're at greater risk of developing manifestations of heart disease. And again, we're trying to prevent those things. Thank you. So here's another area that we really feel is very critical, and that is to not smoke. Now, we think about generational habits, and smoking, thankfully, is not something that's in favor as much in my generation. But I will say in the younger generation with vaping and other types of non-tobacco or non-cigarette based usage, those are also risk factors for heart disease. So we would encourage you to think about not smoking, and if you have been a smoker, that you would quit, because smoking is the single most preventable cause of death in the United States, and 21% of American women over the age of 18 do smoke in some form. And again, typically, they're women who are older than 70, the baby boomer generation, a little bit older than them, participated in a lot of tobacco as it was very socially prevalent. And then now we have the vaping era. So we're going to hope and pray that our younger generation realizes that that's not a good habit to keep, and that our older sisters are able to quit if they're not already. Great. And then this is another thing that we have to really emphasize, which is physical inactivity. So the challenges around us in Los Angeles, we have amazing weather that in the wintertime, we can go outside and just go for a great walk. Other areas of the country, in the South and the East in particular, in the Midwest, they don't have that luxury. And belonging to a fitness center or involving yourself in a gym or fitness program is vital to longevity. Exercise will increase the good cholesterol, the HDL. Inactivity will increase the bad cholesterol, the LDL. And when you look at physical inactivity and you look at the statistics, it would suggest that Black women are more inactive than white women, not as inactive as Hispanic women, but also not as active as Asian women. So we want to think about the value and importance of exercise, exercise in any form, whatever you enjoy, yoga, dance, walking, spin, whatever you enjoy, encouraging that again amongst us and our sisters. So the reason why physical inactivity is such a challenge is that physical inactivity actually increases heart disease and stroke risk. So all you really need to do is 30 minutes. 30 minutes a day for 5 out of the 7 days per week will reduce your risk of heart disease significantly. So again, if you're doing something, but maybe not so consistently, try to find something that you enjoy that you can do at least 5 days a week. Now, if you're like me, Monday through Friday, it's part of my routine. Exercise, exercise, exercise. Saturday, maybe not. And Sunday, forget about it. I'm trying to get ready for Monday. So the reality is, though, 5 days of solid physical activity, 30 minutes or more, 5 days a week will really help control both the blood pressure, again, by increasing your good cholesterol, your HDL, decreasing your LDL, reducing your stress, enhancing those catecholamines that are good for your body, decreasing cortisol, which is your stress that raises the blood pressure. Those are the kinds of things you want to focus on, and ultimately lowering your risk for heart disease. So this is the area, sisters, where I really wanted to focus, because this is the area that we really struggle with the most. Innately, most African-American women are considered to be overweight, innately. Part of it is genetics, part of it is body habitus, but there is a component of this that's related to inactivity. Though we know that the reality of how our genetics make us amazing human beings, we have to do our best to focus on trying to achieve a closer to ideal body weight. I don't ever recommend someone get skinny, thin for the purpose of getting thin. That's not it. It's really about activity and increasing your physical fitness. Again, there are lots of people who are very physically fit who are considered to be overweight based on, we'll say, Eurocentric standards. So that's not the goal. The goal is for you to be active. And with activity comes, again, a wellness component that you will not be able to underestimate in the benefits of your life, from a stress reduction perspective, from a well-being perspective, just mental clarity. But again, we want to try to encourage and really implore our sisters to be as physically active as they possibly can to combat what could be, again, a significant risk factor for heart disease, which is obesity. Again, overweight is something that a lot of women struggle with. And again, being slightly overweight is not a concern if you're physically fit. The goal is to develop fitness and wellness and to not focus on specific numbers, but to really focus on your overall health, your spiritual, your physical, and your mental health. So when thinking about other conditions that put us at risk for heart disease, diabetes is the most common metabolic disorder that puts individuals at risk for heart disease. Well, when we know that diabetes is so prevalent in the African American community and so prevalent in the African American women's community, we really have to take some time just to focus on what diabetes actually is. So we know that the disease is very prevalent. Over 6 million American women over the age of 20 have diabetes, and some of the literature would suggest that half of all adults that are of African ancestry over the age of 50 have diabetes, or what's known as prediabetes, which is a metabolic syndrome. So we really have to do our best to talk about how we can promote and stabilize wellness when it comes to our blood sugars. So just to clarify, just to provide some definition construct for you all to understand what diabetes is, most commonly in the African American community, we talk about type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is where your body becomes resistant to the insulin that's being produced by your pancreas. Type 1 diabetes is where your pancreas no longer produces insulin. And in that instance, you're needing to take insulin from an exogenous source, meaning you're having to inject in some way. And then there are people who sit between type 1 and type 2, which may be people who have developed an autoimmune type diabetes but are adults. Most people who have type 1 diabetes develop that as children. Most people who have type 2 diabetes develop that as adults. And if you are insulin resistant and develop type 2 diabetes, oftentimes you can reduce your risk for the need for as much medication, or perhaps even eliminate medication through physical activity and changes with your diet. But that's only for type 2 diabetes. If you have type 1 diabetes, unfortunately, that means you will be insulin dependent. And if you have an autoimmune type of diabetes, you will also require some form of insulin for sustaining of your health. The definition of diabetes is based on blood glucose values, both a fasting glucose value taken twice of 126 or greater, or the standard hemoglobin A1C test with a value of 6.5 or greater, twice separated by 3 months. So that's how we define diabetes. So you may ask, well, how does diabetes, it's a disorder that I talked about related to the pancreas, how does that affect heart disease? Well, unfortunately, diabetes has the tendency of lowering your good cholesterol, raising your triglycerides, and also raising that bad cholesterol that I mentioned previously, also known as the LDL. So when those numbers rise, you have an increase in the viscosity or the thickness of your blood, giving potential risk to decreasing blood flow to your heart, decreasing blood flow to your brain, decreasing blood flow throughout your body. And that's how we have heart attacks and strokes. So again, this is why diabetes is so incredibly crucial, that we know that if we have diabetes, that we manage it to the best of our abilities so we can prevent the unfortunate manifestations of cardiovascular disease. But remember that 1 in 2 adults over the age of 50 who are African American tend to have diabetes. However, many of them do not know. So it's important that you go and get your annual physical exam, or at least go and speak with your physician, even if it's on telemedicine, around getting your blood checked at least once a year to ensure that you're aware of your values, that you know whether or not you're at risk for diabetes. Lots of women have been told that they have pre-diabetes, and that's that condition where you're not abnormal yet, but you're approaching an abnormal value, but your numbers are not normal. And the way to ensure that you do not become a diabetic is through physical activity and maintaining a healthy diet. So the ultimate bad, unfortunately, of what happens when one does develop heart disease is that they have a heart attack. So the disease itself of the heart is usually due to a lack of blood flow to the heart. But it's important that we get medical attention if indeed there's any concern that we might have that particular problem. Now, the only way to really know that is if you are familiar with the warning signs, if you're familiar with the symptoms. For women, unfortunately, however, these classic signs are not necessarily prevalent. So it's one of those things where we say in medicine, know your body. It's important for you to recognize when something is not right. It may not be the classic symptom. It may be 1 or 2 of these symptoms. But again, when you know you're not feeling well, you have to advocate for yourself and really ensure that you get the care that's necessary to improve and sustain your health. But if you were to develop uncomfortable pressure, squeezing chest pain, or fullness in the center of the chest that lasts more than a few minutes, that is definitely something that needs to be evaluated right away. For women, often they get atypical left-sided symptoms. So pain in the jaw, pain in the neck, pain even in the stomach. They feel like they may have some heartburn, but it persists, it continues. It doesn't come and go with their eating, but again, it's some kind of discomfort in the stomach. That also could be a sign of heart disease. Also, symptoms in the left upper arm, or both arms actually, consistent and persistent, could be a sign of heart disease. This is combined with shortness of breath, that again really makes you feel like you're laboring to breathe. And you combine that with either a cold sweat or some nausea or just feeling lightheaded. Again, when you know you're not feeling well, when you know you're not well, this is when, again, you need to seek medical attention. Stroke, similarly, is something that you have to know something is not right. And so we're talking about where there's a lack of blood flow to the brain. And when that happens, usually you experience a sudden numbness or weakness of the face, any part of the body, sudden confusion or trouble speaking, problems seeing or viewing things, problems walking, or a very severe headache with no known or underlying cause. So again, I just wanted to provide you some information, some food for thought for heart disease, as we know that February is Go Red for Women's Health Month. At this time, I also want to focus on self-care and encourage you to take opportunities like this with NAASC-LA to really spend time with yourself, to really focus and recharge and rejuvenate yourself through the love and friendship of your sisterhood. Because our sisterhood actually is what helps to invigorate me, and I know many others, and we have to utilize self-care, stress reduction, and wise judgment when thinking about the way to best take care of our health and take care of our heart. So at this time, I'll ask if anyone has any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. And thank you so much for your attention. So I see a bunch of questions in the chat. So I'm going to, oh, I see a lot of them are friendship and love. So I appreciate y'all. So let me just start with, if I could, let's see. There was a question about, and hello, I see a special shout out from Robin. Hello, Sora. I would like to say that, it's important that we understand intermittent hypertension. So someone in the chat, I think, oh, this is Lynn. So I'm sorry, this is Robin. So the question is, do you recommend medication for women who have intermittent high blood pressure? I say yes. And the reason why is because, unfortunately, we're not always sure what our triggers are going to be to make that blood pressure go up. If indeed you're finding yourself to be on the cusp, and I'm one of those people like that as well, my blood pressure can vary anywhere from 110 to 140. And if I'm stressed out, and usually the stress, it was my former job, not my current job, but my former job, I would be stressed out, and I work in a medical group. So we had access to all kinds of blood pressure cuffs. And my colleagues would be like, oh, Valerie, sit down, let's check your blood pressure. 149/99, not so good. That is because of the stress of that moment. It was always some crisis or something crazy going on at work. So I would say yes. Now, there's lots of things when it comes to blood pressure management, there are lots of things to consider. And I always suggest you start off with a diuretic. Now, I know that women don't necessarily like the concept of the diuretic because that means you got to go to the bathroom. But you take your diuretic first thing in the morning. It works amazing for your blood pressure. And guess what? You're at your ideal body weight. And so, someone who's always striving, I'm always thinking, oh, I need to try to get closer to that ideal body weight. I want to be in a certain range. That diuretic is helpful because we eat, unfortunately, just naturally too much sodium. There's sodium in everything. There's sodium hidden in everything. If we go to work and we have frozen food and we microwave it, there's a bunch of sodium in that. And then let alone all the snacks that we enjoy, taking a little hydrochlorothiazide lowers your blood pressure, gets rid of that excess sodium that we don't need. And as African Americans, unfortunately, many of us are salt sensitive. So the concept of salt sensitivity, there's a lot of research in the African American community about sodium retention that seems to be very prevalent in Black people. Specifically, we look at antiquity, we look at generations, how we were able to survive the Middle Passage and others couldn't. A lot of it had to do with the genetics around our sodium retention. And so the concept of taking a diuretic that would rid us of that excess sodium and also keep us from retaining excess fluid, I think is a good thing. And the literature definitely agrees with that. So if your blood pressure is borderline, it's better safe to take a small something, and maybe a diuretic, hydrochlorothiazide is an example, or chlorothalidone, just a small little diuretic in the morning, something that's not going to have you up all night. You won't be going to the bathroom through the night, but you will find that your blood pressure is a little bit lower. That's when you have that stressful moment, either through work or your personal life, your blood pressure is not peaking, it's not going sky high. And unfortunately, a lot of people figure that out only because something bad happens. They're like, oh, my blood pressure is usually good. Well, don't that one time for it not to be so good that you have a bad outcome. So I certainly would consider that to be an important thing. So let me just see if there's any other questions in the chat.
Valerie?
Yes,
Hi, this is Bridget. So I have a question about intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you say about intermittent fasting?
Okay, so I'm a big fan, and those of you who are my friends know, I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting. I've also talked to a lot of people about it. The literature is kind of mixed about intermittent fasting. I found it to be very helpful for myself because I used to be very chubby. So some people on this call remember when I was very chubby. Kim, don't shake your head. I was very chubby. And so I started intermittent fasting. Probably Andrea remembers when I was very chubby. She's honest, so she'll say yes. I started intermittent fasting probably 5 years. I'm trying to think. Anika and Jill, you might remember. About 5 years ago, and I saw tremendous improvement. And the reason why I started intermittent fasting is because the literature in the pediatric endocrinology community talked about how type 1 and type 2 diabetics were able to improve their glycemic control, improve their glucose levels tremendously, and stabilize their blood sugars through intermittent fasting. Then I met an endocrinologist, and I actually work with, she's my endocrinologist, and I work with her, and she is also a huge advocate. So in the global literature, it's very positive for intermittent fasting. The challenge is sustaining it. I've been able to sustain it for 5-6 years, though my weight does fluctuate a bit, but the literature is very clear. Intermittent fasting is a safe and effective way to look at ways that you can hone in on, we'll say, bad habits. So if you're the kind of person who tends to be a late night snacker, there's no benefit to late night snacking. There's just no benefit. You snack and then you go to bed. Well, you're not going to burn those calories. You're certainly not going to find them to help you feel energized to do some work if you're going to bed. So the reality is that things like that, people who eat late and maybe don't have the right sort of, how can I say, discipline around what they eat, intermittent fasting is a wonderful thing. I know I used to come home from work and kind of crash and burn. I would watch TV and eat. And that's really where my weight came from because, fatigue and hunger are similar in our mind. We can't necessarily differentiate in our minds the difference between hunger and fatigue. So often, especially as Black women, we think of stress, we think of hunger, we think of fatigue as the same emotional axis. Intermittent fasting actually kind of pushes that away by giving you a set time that you can eat, and you are supposed to make very healthy choices during that set time. And then in the evening, you're less likely to have some of those foods that are just going to essentially build up in your metabolic system and not contribute to energy usage and energy efficiency. So again, metabolic disorders tend to respond quite nicely to intermittent fasting, and just basic weight loss definitely seems to respond well. Though you're not going to have huge weight loss with intermittent fasting, but you can certainly see great improvements in your baseline weight. And what's most important for a lot of us, you can see an improvement in your central obesity. So that little midsection where women tend to get a little bit of a gut, intermittent fasting seems to help quite a bit in that area.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes, but we have some questions. I'm going to read them out to you because we have some questions in the chat. That way you don't have to look at them. So I'll read them to
Bridget. I think Kimberly has her hand raised. She's for a while.
I'm trying to find it. Kimberly, go ahead.
Yeah, so I do have a question, and I would like to get back to the intermittent fasting because I know that there are a lot of questions around that. But in regards to physical activity, exercise, I know you mentioned about 5 days a week, 30 minutes at least. Does the same thing apply? Let's say, for instance, if I don't have the 5 days a week, but maybe 3 or 4, do I just extend it? Like, how exactly would you recommend 30 minutes, 3 days a week, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 3
Right.
days a week? How should I guess, break that up, so to speak?
So Kim, anything that you can do is better than nothing, right? So if you can do 3 days a week, that's better than no days a week. If you can do 3 days a week at 60 minutes, that's equivalent. So the literature doesn't say that you have to do 5 days a week. This is the medical literature tries to make stuff easy, right? Oh, it's only 30 minutes a day for 5 days. Well, child, on Friday, who feels like exercising? I mean, you don't feel like it, but like for me, I feel like I have to. So I get on my Peloton bike and I'm doing 30 minutes of high intensity craziness, right? But it's 30 minutes and I'm done. Versus I used to kind of walk, jog around the neighborhood. And honestly, to be as efficient, it would take me twice as much time. So you find what you can do and you do it to the best of your ability. And again, it's not about, trying to meet a measure. It's about doing the best you can. So again, if you're not doing anything and you do 30 minutes, 3 days a week, knowing you've got 2 little ones and a job and a husband, I mean, again, you do the best you can. The reality is that most women of color struggle with the concept of, our hair. So I did my hair for y'all today. I had a 7 o'clock hair appointment to get my hair pressed. Then my hairdresser wasn't available. You see me blinking. So I took out my little flat iron and I pressed my hair for y'all. Now, the reality is because I know somebody gonna take a picture. And I don't want y'all to see me in my regular state. I'm vain. I don't have any problem saying that. Most of y'all know me. So, but Monday through Friday, I go to work. My hair is kinky cute. That's what I call it. Now, I call it kinky cute. My husband doesn't say the same. He puts his hand back in here and talking about, do you think you could have brushed it a little bit better? I don't care. I don't care. My little old patients at the practice don't care. The little white people I work with don't know the difference. So Monday through Friday, it's all natural, all God, all God. But then, I have an occasion to speak in front of my sisters, and I put the flat iron in my hair. Now, I would never, ever spend this much time on my hair anymore. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I shower and my hair just is pulled in a little bun. That's all I do. But if you have to work in a professional environment, and again, I don't think that my environment is professional, to be honest with you, and I say it that way because my patients are going to adapt to how I look. I see mostly Black and Latino patients. They're accustomed to natural hair. It's not a big deal. If I worked in corporate America, if I was working in some environment where there was some real, if I wasn't in California, maybe, I mean, California, we're progressive over here. If I was somewhere else and I really had to do my hair in the morning, I couldn't do my Peloton, perhaps. I mean, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning now, and that's a pain. So, most Black women, my assistant, love her to death. She got all kind of a wig situation going on, and she got her edges done, and she's got her lashes on, all of that. I didn't do none of that. And if I had to do all of that, there's no way. There's no way. My fitness program would, So my priority is me, okay? So people, again, when you have the empowerment to make those choices, it's not about dollars and cents. I'm the leader of my group. I'm the medical director of my group. I set the standard. So it's not a big deal. I'm the only Black doctor in my office. Not a big deal. Now, my assistant, who's from Long Beach, she'll sometimes tell me, oh, Dr. Green, you worked out hard this morning, huh? Yes, I did, ma'am. Yes, I did. She's 20 years younger than me and weighs 20 pounds more than I do. I'm trying to live forever, maybe to 95, and have all my faculties. I don't know that that's her focus. So again, we got to think about our kids. We got to think about our sisters. We got to think about our loved ones. And the hair can't be an issue. And if it is an issue around our fitness program, then we got to figure out something else. But you have to sweat in this world, right? Yeah. The little walk-in and stuff is fine, but you got to sweat. You got to burn the calories. You got to work hard. And if you can do that 2 days a week, 3 days a week, any day is fine. Just do your best.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We have 5 people that have questions in the chat. I want to get to them. Nichelle, you have your hand raised. Okay, so Valerie, can you do this? Because is everybody good? Are we good? Because we're over, but we want to make sure we get all the questions answered. So we're going to go like this. Valerie, if you're good, we're good. Nichelle,
Good.
Stacy, Lynn, Anika, and Kia. So will you ask your question? So Nichelle, you're up.
And Andrea has her hand up. Andrea's been having her hand up for a long time.
Yeah, she has her hand up. Andrea, okay, you go after Kia.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Then y'all gonna.
Okay.
We got everybody, I think. Okay.
All right. Val, so I know you gave a lot of good suggestions about heart disease. So my question is, once heart disease sets in, can you reverse it with all of the change of course, like diet and exercise and so forth? Is the heart able to repair itself like maybe other muscles can repair and heal itself in the body?
I would say yes, but there's that caveat. It depends on the severity of the disease state, right? So there's always the potential of improving your health, always. Is everything reversible? I cannot say. Many things are, however. I've seen patients have what we call an ejection fraction. The ejection fraction is how well the heart can pump. That's the real number that we look out to really discern if a person is functional. I've seen people go from an ejection fraction of 60, which is normal, down to 20, which is very, very poor heart outcome and output, back up to the 50s. And the reason why that happened, they had a heart attack and unfortunately their ejection fraction fell, but then they did a lot of really aggressive things to change their heart. They took their medication, they ate well, they exercised, and they had good genetics on their side. And a lot of us do have those factors. I can never say never, because I have seen people come from good to unfortunately not so good, and then bring things around remarkably. So I would say yes, there's always that chance, but you have to take into account the severity of the disease, which is why it's so important to know when things are becoming a problem. If you're pre-diabetic, if you're borderline hypertensive, don't wait until the blood pressure is so high that it's going to take 3 and 4 medications to bring it to normal. Look at the opportunity to, again, take something small and early. Maybe you don't even need a medication of full strength. You might even be able to get away with a half a tablet of something. Don't fear medication, but fear the end result if you don't take the proper medication. That doesn't mean that you accept everything that your doctor says. I am one to say, question me and share with me if you have a side effect, if you have a problem, if you have a concern, if you have a question. Don't just go along, especially if you're in a community where your physician doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience with women of color. There are certain medicines that work better for Black women versus other communities. Doesn't mean they would not help us, but again, we have to be kind of cognizant to advocate for what we think works well for us, and also take into account nutrition, physical and mental health. All of those things are very important.
All righty. Okay, Stacy, you're up.
Hi there, Dr. Amos. Talk to me about a low cholesterol diet, which is my doctor told me I need to go on low cholesterol diet. Now, I've been online and done some research, but I'd rather just talk to someone about it.
Okay. Did your doctor tell you what your cholesterol value was?
Yes, I have that in a report. I don't have it in front of me right this second, but yes, I have the numbers.
Okay. You know what? Interestingly, a low cholesterol diet, unless you have heart disease, has not really proven to affect morbidity or mortality, which is really sickness versus death. Unless, though, you have diabetes or some other metabolic syndrome or high blood pressure, in addition to the cholesterol. What we tell people in general is to be mindful that you want to eat just a healthy diet, not necessarily a low cholesterol diet, not necessarily a high protein diet, a healthy diet, fruits and vegetables, emphasis on vegetables, Mediterranean diet, emphasis on seafood, emphasis on poultry, reduction in sodium, But the concept of a low cholesterol diet, again, unless it is combined with other metabolic issues, hasn't really proven to reduce risk of long-term life, reduce risk of long-term sequela. So I would say just be mindful of things that are highly cholesterol laden or very fatty. You want to avoid those things, but it may be your genetics, but also ask about your HDL cholesterol, because this is one thing that I see often. Patients will come to me and they'll say, my previous doctor told me I had high cholesterol. And then I look at their cholesterol profile and I find that their cholesterol is elevated because they have a lot of HDL, which is cardiac protective, meaning it helps your heart. Not all high cholesterol is bad. So you just have to know your numbers, be judicious about what you're doing as far as your eating, just trying to be like mindful of a healthy diet, but really what improves the cholesterol the most is not your diet, it's your exercise. So if you can focus on doing cardiovascular exercise where you can increase that HDL, decrease the LDL, that's much more valuable than the kind of food that you're eating if you eat a traditional American diet. Most of us eating a traditional American diet in the West, we'll say. Many of us have ancestry in other parts of the country, and we understand the tradition of our culture, but we try not to eat that way. And so if you're one who's adhering to, a progressive diet, a progressive California diet, we try to Mediterranean-ish and all these different things, you're probably eating fine. It may be that you need to increase what you're doing as far as your exercise level, again, just to combat what might be the LDL cholesterol challenge that you have. But I would ask you to dig into those numbers, look at the HDL, and there's something called the cholesterol to HDL ratio that tells you your risk of heart disease. Your LDL has nothing to do with it. And again, the reality is that LDL is the bad cholesterol, but if your HDL is really high, and if you have, there's something called the longevity gene, people who have cholesterols in the 250s, 260s, 280s and higher, because their HDL cholesterol is greater than 80, they live to be 100 or more. And though if you were to talk to them and say, what's your cholesterol? Oh, my cholesterol's high. Well, you're also 96. So clearly you don't have heart disease. It's because you have that longevity gene. So you have to kind of dig into the numbers and again, focus as best you can on just eating sensibly. But if you do have a cholesterol concern, focus on your aerobic activity. And again, if you're one who, like me, I've always been kind of athletic, but then middle age set in and I had to try to get serious, then you do what's necessary. And to be honest with you, some of the hardest things, jumping rope, hard. So easy as a child, so easy. Hard when you're 48, hard. Jump some rope, you know what I'm saying? Do some stuff that's hard. Something that's gonna really help you stimulate your body and perspire. That's gonna work. That's gonna increase the HDL and decrease the LDL, and you'll be fine.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go put on my running shoes right now. Thank
There
you.
you go.
I know, I think all of us want to go do a 5K right now. Okay, Lynn, you're up.
Okay, thank you. This is a quick question. And Valerie, oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be here and listen to you, because you as a Black doctor talking to Black women, I've never heard things broken down like you're doing it now. So I appreciate it. But really quickly, you said a diuretic would be okay. Is that okay daily, long-term, or like, can we take it like we take vitamins every day, or?
You certainly can. You certainly can. The challenge, there's many different, there's two specific classes of diuretics, thiazide diuretics and loop diuretics, two different classes. But there are many different diuretics that women in particular take. And back in the day, I practiced in Orange County, and I had lots of patients, elderly women who didn't look like us per se, who were taking diuretics and weren't hypertensive. And I'm like, why are you on this medicine? Oh, doctor, it just helps me maintain. They're older women. Diuretics are very, very safe, but you do need to monitor at least once a year. The literature would suggest once a year, your potassium and your electrolytes. So the challenge is thiazide diuretics are usually electrolyte neutral, meaning they don't usually affect your potassium or your sodium or any of those kinds of vitamins or minerals. But a loop diuretic, furosemide, Lasix, those are commonly used. Those tend to lower your potassium. So if you're taking something like that, potassium and sometimes even sodium will be leached into your urine. You'll pee it out. And so it'd be important to at least know that you don't have low levels of those electrolytes. They're easily replaced through a vitamin or a supplement. So again, it's actually kind of good. Most people would suggest you take your multivitamin with your diuretic, because then you're going to get your electrolytes and your minerals, and you're going to use the product to lower your blood pressure. That's what we recommend it for. And you'll be able to be in a great place. So the literature is very clear. The only time we find it's not necessarily good to use a diuretic is for that very super senior population, people who are over the age of 90, who may get dehydrated easily or have what we call vasovagal hypotension. They stand up, their blood vessels are kind of slow to pull the blood up to their brain. They get dizzy and then they fall out or something like that. That's the one instance where we say it's probably not the best medicine for some, but we still use it in, again, our seniors, super seniors, as we call them. So very safe, diuretics are very safe, but again, you do need to monitor your electrolytes, the sodium, specifically potassium, sometimes chloride, but it's just once a year. It's not frequent, but again, you should get those levels checked.
Oh, thank you. Excellent.
Sure.
Valerie, you are putting down some knowledge today. I tell you, I just spot on amazing. Anika, it's your turn.
All right.
Spy, that's my best friend.
I know.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Spellman Sisters and Dr. Valerie. This is amazing information. I have a question similar to my sister, Nichelle McMurray, about can you reverse the effects of being pre-diabetic? I think you answered a little bit of it before, but can you kind of thwart the effects of being pre-diabetic?
Sure. So being pre-diabetic, if you are aware that you're pre-diabetic, you absolutely can reverse that or stabilize it to the point where it's not progressive. The challenge is most of us do not know that we're pre-diabetic. We find out that we're diabetic. We jumped over that pre thing. And pre-diabetics, typically that period of metabolic intolerance or metabolic insensitivity of the pancreas can be up to 10 years. And because nowadays we're able to check the hemoglobin A1C, the fasting blood sugars, things like that, without having to do glucose tolerance testing, it's very simple to do these tests, and you can know if you're at risk for diabetes. Now, certainly, I can share from personal experience. Both my parents are diabetic. I'm a doctor. I should have known when I was pre-diabetic. I did not, though. I went from not diabetic to a diabetic. Now, part of the reason was extreme stress. I was traveling cross country and eating all kinds of junk in the middle of the night and all this stuff and being extremely chubby. And so, I made those changes and things definitely stabilized. Had I made those changes prior to becoming a diabetic, as a pre-diabetic, I'm certain I would have been able to forestall the genetics. But I say forestall because, unfortunately, if you, like myself, have the genetics for insulin resistance and insulin insufficiency, so on one side of my family, my mother's side, mostly type 2 diabetics who get diabetes when they're 60, 70 and up. My father's side, unfortunately, diabetics who are insulin required in their 30s and 40s, which would suggest that my family has a lineage for autoimmune diabetes, which is what runs in my family. Most Black people don't have that, though. Most Black people have, unfortunately, I've been inactive. I've been eating the wrong kinds of things. And slowly but surely, my insulin levels have become higher and higher, and I've become insulin resistant over time. And with insulin resistance, you can improve it through diet and exercise, which is why the concept of inactivity is such a real, it's the factor that's the real variable for Black women. If we can focus on being active, we can prevent a lot of these other things. We can't override genetics. In my situation, I wasn't able to override genetics, but I certainly am much wiser and can be a better advocate for my patients, knowing what my individual experience has been. But again, it's a reality that inactivity, and I'm never inactive, I'm very active, but unfortunately, genetics can be much more powerful than other things. But if you don't have that kind of genetics, physical activity can be the big deal breaker, as well as your eating habits. And Anika knows because I profess this to her every week: low glycemic and intermittent fasting. So low glycemic means cutting back on the amount of sugar that we eat, because unfortunately, sugar and sodium, those are the two. Black folks, we honestly need to avoid sugar. And then we need to avoid salt. We need to avoid them both. And I say Black folks because, again, we have this genetic predisposition towards these conditions. Others do have them, but you see the incidence is much higher in African Americans and specifically African American women. Though we tend to outlive our partners and spouses, we outlive men, but we still have this very high incidence. And so, again, if we can reduce the amount of sugar that we eat, because sugar is an inflammatory marker, right? Sugar can promote inflammation. If we can reduce the amount of sodium that we ingest, that also will improve many of the factors that we're talking about.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're coming down to the wire, Kia. Valerie, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem.
This is better than going to my doctor.
Hey, Valerie, it's
Hey,
Kia.
Kia.
My question is about mini meals versus intermittent. Are they the same thing, or is that a separate category?
Okay, so there's a lot of, it can be combined, I'll just say. Some people suggest, and it really depends on who you talk to from a nutrition and dietary perspective. Some people suggest small meals frequently throughout the day. We call that grazing. That works if you don't have a metabolic condition, that works just fine. But if you have a metabolic condition like diabetes, grazing is not recommended. The reason why is you end up consuming more calories over the long run because you're subconsciously just eating a lot. You may not think of it as a lot because it's small portions, but the frequency tends to add up more to your detriment versus if you sit down and have your meal, you know exactly what you're eating. And you can eat multiple times through the day, but not necessarily those small meals. Again, it's kind of time consuming, honestly, to count carbs and look at your sugars and all of that in every meal. But if you do that for, say, your 3 solid meals and then have 2 snacks, that's a better way to sustain and be aware of what you're intaking versus what we call grazing. Grazing is small little meals throughout the day. Now, intermittent fasting is where you literally stop eating for a certain block of time. And I know that Miss Jill can speak to it because she does some intermittent fasting. Her schedule is different from mine. My schedule just mirrors my work schedule. I have to eat at work because otherwise I feel like I'm going crazy. Most of us realize there is a link between stress and food. And so I look forward to lunch and I look forward to my afternoon snack. So I eat essentially from 8 until 6. I eat between 8 and 6. I work out in the morning. I do what I need to do and I start eating at 8 o'clock. I have usually no snack, but then I have lunch and then I have a midday snack and then I have dinner. But each of my meals is very sort of focused on how many carbohydrates. I have to count all of these things because, again, I'm trying to beat back diabetes. So I have to be very conscious. But when it comes to the average individual, you don't have to do that. But the reality is, if you were to look at the literature around intermittent fasting, by stopping the time that you eat and not eating later or being conscious and aware of that window when you do eat, you tend to consume fewer calories per day and fewer carbohydrates. And if you do that, ultimately, you will lose some weight.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Sure.
Okay. Andrea, bring us home, baby.
Hey, okay, well, this was a quick question, actually listening to you talking about exercise. And so Valerie, thank you very much for everything you said. But to just be quick, I walk. I've never joined a gym. I don't have any exercise equipment. And I walk the neighborhood a couple times a week. In better weather, it could even be 5 times a week. But my daughter's always telling me, Mom, you need to walk that hill and come back. It's my heart that she's concerned that I haven't geared it up. I mean, I could walk half hour to an hour just around versus, I guess, go to the hill, come up, I mean, I've done it once or twice and I do have to stop. I don't know, 220 something. I don't know whether it's yards or what it is from Arroyo down to the Rose Bowl and then come back up. What's your take on, you said sweat. I enjoy my walk.
So let me just say this, Andrea, one would applaud you because we know that you have been doing you look fabulous, always have. So that's one thing. You're doing enough. You're doing enough. Your daughter, who I also know, wants you to do more because that's what daughters say. I'm telling my mom, you should be doing yoga, mommy. You should be doing yoga. She's like, mm-hmm. So the reality is that your daughter wants the best for you. She wants you to push yourself. She wants you to get out of your comfort zone. She wants you to do more. And now that you're a retiree,
Yes.
she wants you to, change it up a bit. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing, however. And actually, you're doing everything right because you've made exercise your daily tradition. And that in itself is amazing. And again, that in itself is why you look so great. So I would say your daughter's right, and you're right too. Your daughter's right because she wants you to live to be 100 and have all your faculties. She wants you to see your grandkids and all of that stuff, right? So she's going to push you because she knows that you have the potential. You have the potential. And the challenge is we can't rest on our laurels, and sometimes we do have to get out of our comfort zone. You can do the same thing every day for a really long time. It won't change your physical effort. You'll get kind of accustomed. You get to a plateau and you don't really gain much from it, though consistency, again, is certainly better than not doing it. But again, the reality is your daughter is wanting you to push yourself. And I would agree, try to push yourself. I'm not suggesting that you get short of breath or do anything that might cause you to feel uncomfortable. But if you're doing 30 minutes where you were, let's just say before you retired, if you're doing 30 minutes a day or 40 minutes every few days or every other day, try to take it up a notch because now you have a little bit more time.
Yeah, and the hill a little bit. There's benches midway the hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reality is you don't have to belong to a gym. Again, I think that our mortgages are paying for the fitness centers that other people go to back east. Okay, our rents and our mortgages, because Lord knows we pay 3 times more to live in Southern California than where many of us are from.
Amen.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the screen with the exception of Maria. I think Maria, you're from LA. And Andrea, you're from LA, right?
All right, Pasadena, right here.
There you go, exactly. Many of us, though, have lived places and understand that you could get a beautiful home for $350,000. Here in California, can't even get a condo for $350,000. So we're paying to live in this beautiful place. So you should get out and just walk. And even when it's bad weather, since Anika and Michelle are on the call, it's not bad like they got it.
No, that's true.
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, and for those of us who grew up like Jill and I and Nika, we grew up in Philly. Michelle grew up in St. Louis, Lord Jesus. Kim in Memphis. Oh my Lord. Right now they're getting snow. What do we have? It's overcast. We can walk outside in overcast. It's not a big deal. So we should try. Just walk. Just walk. Andrea, you're doing a great job. Just keep it up.
Thank you.
Gosh, I know we could probably be on this phone all day, but this is Valentine's weekend, and I know some of y'all have your booze, some of us don't, but we're good. But Valerie is my STEM major, person and she's my reunion person. Oh my gosh, can I just tell you, I speak for everybody, I'm sure, and everybody that had to leave, that you have just made our day today, sister. And can we just,
Thank you.
can we clap?
Thank you.
My
Oh, you guys
goodness.
are too kind. This is all family. Y'all are all family on this call. So this made it fun
Hey,
and fabulous.
bravo.
All
It has
family.
been an amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to spend
Oh,
time
Maria,
with us.
hey.
There she is. But we will, in March, you all, we will have a wellness freaking activity. After all of this talk, we will do a wellness activity. So for March, we will find somewhere to do something.
I've been wanting to do that for a long time. So
yeah, and Andrea, maybe we'll come out to Pasadena and walk the Rose Bowl and go up the hill.
Okay.
Okay. But in the meantime, this has been recorded. We will upload it to the NAASC-LA website later today when it's downloaded and compressed, so we can get it put on, so that you may always go back and have it and review it at your leisure. Okay. Thank you so much. Before we leave, we would like to close out with the Spelman hymn, because that is where we have converged upon and gotten all of our love. It's always great to sing it and go back to remembering what it was like standing in Sisters Chapel and singing that. So Maria, will you pull it up? It's been a pleasure. Valerie, again, thank you. Thank you to everyone who spent the time, answered the questions, been engaged. This was probably one of the best meetings I've attended from here in a long time. And I just want to say thank you for the love, the Spelman love. All right. I think that's it. Maria, you got it?
yes.
So I'll adjourn the meeting after the end.
Sing our beloved Spelman hymn.
Can you hear it, everybody?
Yes. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Everybody be safe. Have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Stay well. Continue to mask. Get your vaccinations. Get your second vaccinations. Valerie, thank you for being on the front lines, taking care of everyone in the pandemic. We appreciate you. We applaud you. We love you. Y'all stay well, and meeting adjourned.
Bridget, do we get something to Emily Jones? Did we get anything to Emily Jones for her birthday? And Valerie, happy birthday. Whatever, I know this, right?
Wait, who's
Thank you. It's Friday. Her birthday's Friday.
Her birthday's
Okay.
Friday? Okay.
Weren't we gonna get something to her as a chapter? 100, right?
We will.
She will be 100, yes, on Friday.
This Friday, on the
Your birthday
19th?
too?
Sorry?
Valerie, is your birthday coming up too?
Yes, Miss Emily trumps me. That's okay. We have birthdays on the same day.
That's what I thought.
She's gonna be 100. I'll be 49.
And I'm right after you. I turned 60 on the 20th.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
All good.
When's your birthday, Valerie?
February 19th.
The 19th.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And Miss Jones, if she's the
We'll
19th,
get that out to Emily.
we will
And we
definitely.
say,
Yep, the 19th.
Okay.
happy
All
birthday,
right.
Valerie.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday, Valerie. Love you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
And
Take
blessings.
Love
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kira.